Sexy Christmas, sexy Christmas, sexy Christmas time. Because it's Taco Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. It's Taco Tuesday, and it's really good to have you here. We're about to stuff you inside our shells. I'm Emerson Latzia. Gary and Thorne is here. Matt LaMarca is here. I'm filling in for my guy, Brendan Glass Sheen, because he will be at the Celtics game tonight, gentlemen. I'm excited, though, to be here with both of you. Garion, how are you? Good afternoon.
I'm doing great. Glad to have you inside my shell.
It's good to be inside your shell. Matt LaMarca, Big Saxy, we meet again. How have you been?
Doing great. Enjoying the NBA playoffs so far. We've gotten some good games. We've
Hell
got
yeah.
some potential upsets brewing here in the first
Okay.
round. So everything's coming up good here to start the postseason.
Certainly is, man, because I know you're rooting for the Kings, and Warriors haven't trailed 0-2 in a playoff series since 2007. That's the hole that they find themselves in. So the Kings lighting the freaking beam once again. Do you know what? And I brought this up yesterday with Jeff Pratt. Do you know what the beam is composed of, Matt?
I imagine just all the disappointment from the past 17 years.
Okay.
That's just fired into the atmosphere.
That is a very good guess. Gary, do you know what the beam is composed of?
I would assume love.
Very good guess as well. Very similar to Matt's. Kind of like copy my homework, just change up a few answers. Okay.
I was kind of thinking more like a Care Bears scenario, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So
okay.
it's real quick before we get into all the stuff with Draymond Green in that series. The beam is composed of 6 New Salt laser space cannons. That's a pretty great name. 2 blue, 2 red, 2 green. They come together to form the color purple here, Matt. That's how colors work. The beam is a laser. It's not an LED light. It uses about as much power as a hairdryer. Isn't that an interesting fact?
As much power as a hairdryer. Would not have thought that. That's pretty crazy.
I know. Wait, it is crazy. What, Gary? Go ahead.
2
say
red,
what?
2 blue, 2 green?
Yep. 2 blue, 2 red, 2 green.
I mean,
they come together to form purple.
Kindergarten card on people here, but I could probably make purple with just 1 red and 1 blue, if I'm being honest.
You know what, buddy? You take it up with them.
Don't think they tried that, Gary? And you think you know better than the beam professionals?
Yeah,
I might know better than Vivek.
Garion. Okay, so why don't you take it up then with the UC Davis, California Lighting Technology Center?
I will.
All right, I'll get you the number.
Literally, when this show's over, that's the first thing I'm going to do.
Well, on a clear night, the beam is bright enough to be seen in space. We could probably feel the Draymond Green stomp last night, Maddie. What's your stance on that? We talked a little bit about it before we came on air here. You can kind of see the argument to both sides, but Draymond Green, just no way in hell he's getting the benefit of the doubt at this point in his career.
Yeah, and honestly, it's just sad that this kind of stuff is part of Draymond's.
Yeah,
it's going to be part of what we talk about when he hangs it up, right? He's a guy with a Hall of Fame resume who has just multiple antics on his list of achievements and stuff that are going to make it tough for him to be fully appreciated when he hangs it up, right? I mean, and I think that it's not just the teammate, that the opposing teams that are getting frustrated with him now. I think it's his own team, right? Like he kind of, for lack of a better word, he abandons them in game 2. Don't forget that he knocked Jordan Poole unconscious before the start of the season.
Yeah,
like he's not the same talent anymore where you can say, we'll put up with that stuff, but he's going to give us a triple-double in our biggest game of the season. He's just not that player anymore. So it would not shock me if this is the end of the Draymond Green era in Golden State.
How much trouble is Golden State in here, Garrett Bear? Kings won despite shooting 9 of 33 from deep. First playoff run for many of these Kings players too, but really you wouldn't expect that with the way some of them have been playing.
I mean, it looked great, specifically De'Aaron Fox. I mean, look, I think what do they call it? The most clutch award or something like that. It's kind of ridiculous, but living up to it, I'll say that about De'Aaron Fox right now. He cannot miss in the fourth quarter. And that was really the only time the Kings looked even a little shaky, and I guess even the most like optimistic view of what Draymond was attempting to do in that fourth quarter with that stomp, if it was anything aside from just like him losing his cool. Domantas Sabonis goes to the line to take his 2 technical free throws, and he almost airballed the second one. Like for half a second, it really did seem like, and maybe that's just the result of getting your chest stomped on by a 250-pound man, but it did look for a moment that maybe the Kings were going to be a little rattled. We saw Clay hit a couple 3-pointers almost immediately after that, but again, De'Aaron Fox, every time it was a 1-possession game, every time. Harrison Barnes was also really good in the fourth quarter, actually. But
yeah,
I mean,
against his former team,
the one guy who does have a ton of playoff experience. They just looked really composed. Now, obviously, the thing with the Warriors, it's been said a million times. I'll say it 1,000,001. They stink on the road. The next 2 games,
bad.
not on the road. But at some point, they're going to have to win on the road in this series. And like you said, Emerson, you got a really bad shooting game from the Kings. I don't think they are going to very often shoot that poorly from 3-point range. And, to Matt's point, like Draymond, not a net zero on offense by any means. He's still a very good playmaker. And he does regard defensive respect and attention in that capacity. But, this isn't the 2016 Warriors. There's some flaws and some cracks on this team, and this is a pretty big hole they now have to dig themselves out of. And yeah, I came into this series completely flummoxed by the fact that they were the underdogs, just out of sheer reputation. And it has played out, I think, the way a lot of people who were backing the Kings thought it would.
All right, Maddie, I know you were.
Can I just put some numbers on it real quick?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So teams with a 2-0 series lead go on to win a best-of-7 series in the NBA 92.8% of the time.
Okay.
In the first round specifically, it's even a little bit higher than that and almost closer to 94%. So it really is like a very big undertaking that the Warriors have in front of them here. And if any team can do it, it's them. But you're asking them to defy basically most of what history says is going to happen.
Okay. And this is really impressive by the Kings. Like
it is.
We can't overshadow the fact that while they are flawed, this is still like the defending NBA champions, is a team full of 4-time champions. Like this series, you can draw a lot of comparisons, and I'll use a Raptors one just because it's fresh in my mind. But like this 3-6 matchup reminded me a lot of when the Raptors, I think it was 2013, 2014, they win 49 games. Everyone's happy. Congratulations. They draw the 6th seed at the time. It's the Brooklyn Nets, who happen to have Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. Like, and it's one of those situations where you're like, okay, great. Fantastic regular season. It's not going to mean anything. Like this super team you're about to go up against is just going to decide to flip the switch and they'll be fine. And I think that's how a lot of people saw this playing out. Like, again, the Warriors will just have this magic switch, and that has clearly not been the case so far. And again, they're just so bad on the road, like crazy bad.
Yeah. So that said, before we move to tonight, Maddie, what are you more likely to bet here when we're talking exact games than in this series? If you're going with the sweep, you're going 4 games, you get plus 850 on the DK Sportsbook. You're thinking, okay, maybe Sacramento get 1 here in San Francisco, and then kind of finish it up when it goes back home for game 5. So 5 games plus 400, 6 games plus 200. If this thing's going 7, you get plus 125 right now.
Yeah, I would still probably be inclined to take 7 games.
Okay.
I think that Golden State winning 2 straight at home is very realistic. We were talking before the show started. I think they're going to be favored, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 6-7 points in game 3. So if they can even the series up, then they just have to try and steal 1 of 2 in Sacramento potentially, which is doable. So I think that the best bet, honestly, in my eyes, is just to take the Kings to win at minus 160. I mean, minus 160 for a team with a 2-0 lead. I gave you the numbers, right? Like these odds should be way higher than that, right? You're looking at at Philly. Now I know that Philly is beating up on the Nets, but they're up 2-0. They're minus 4,000. So minus 160 seems pretty light given the historical context.
Okay, anything from last night's games or 76ers Nets, anything else from Kings Warriors you guys want to throw out there really quick before we move ahead to tonight?
No, I think 76ers Nets is kind of going sort of how we
Yeah.
expected. I mean, it's the Nets, for as deep a team as they are.
They looked competitive early on in that game. They did.
Sure.
Like, weren't they up at halftime?
They were up 5, I think.
Yeah.
You know, they forced Doc into calling a very quick timeout in the third quarter, and then it just seemed like the 76ers woke up after that and started taking the game a little bit more seriously. And I mean, the Nets, for as nice a collection of role players as they have, and for as much faith that I have in Mikal Bridges to be like a really good 2, it's hard in the playoffs when you just don't have a proven scorer, especially in the half court. And we saw it play out in game 1. I mean, they only scored 101 points, despite the fact I think they had like 40 points about 14 minutes into the game. Like, I think you're going to get a lot of this. The Nets coming out hot because the 76ers are kind of sleepwalking their way through the game. And then when they decide they're actually going to play half court defense and playoff style defense, the Nets just don't have an answer for it.
Well, speaking of 40 points, I believe like the Celtics were leading by at least that at one point in game 1 against the Hawks. They ended up, the Hawks did, losing by 13. So tonight, you could see on your screen, Celtics getting 10.5. No, Celtics are laying 10.5 points. So Hawks getting 10.5 there on the road. What's the bet here on the spread, Gary? Because again, I know they lost by 13, and quite frankly, Trae Young, you look at his numbers, couldn't have played much worse, especially with the eyeball test. If you guys watched it, 16 points, was just 5 for 18 from the field, 1 for 5 from deep. Drastically under his season-long efficiency averages too. So would you actually take the points here in the Hawks?
No, I think I'm just going to keep riding with the Celtics.
Okay.
You know, they were at, I think they opened at 8.5 or 9. I think that number got up to at least 9.5 before tip in game 1, but I'm still relatively comfortable with 10.5. I mean, the Celtics, far and away the best Eastern Conference team this season at home by net rating, outscoring opponents by well over 10 points per 100 possessions. The Hawks, just a team that I don't really have a lot of confidence in. I think there's a reason that, what was it, 75 consecutive days they were within one game of 500 during the regular season. Like,
it's got definition of mediocre right there.
Mediocre. They are a mediocre team. And Trae Young, we now have a relatively large sample. And look, this isn't just a Trae Young thing. This has always been a guys shorter than 6'3" having to score in the playoffs. The track record is not great, especially when you have the interior defense that Boston has. And his 3-point shooting has been iffy at best this season. I just don't necessarily know if he's going to turn it around. He could have a great game. Obviously, he's Trae Young, but I'm still pretty comfortable thinking the Celtics. I don't even think this is a gentleman's sweep. I think they're just going to take this in 4 games and win each one pretty handily.
Okay, what is your early lean right now? We're about an hour and a half away, Maddie, from this game tipping off.
Yeah, I'm going to side with the Hawks here. I think that 10.5 is a lot of points.
Yeah.
The Sharps, it seems like, have a slight lean towards the Hawks as well. I think if Boston shows up and plays their A game, they do win this game comfortably. But as we have seen from the Celtics, not as much this year, but certainly in previous years, like, they don't always come and bring their A game, right? They'll have a game where they sleepwalk. And I think, you know, when you win game 1 or you're leading game 1 by 30 points at halftime, like, you're not necessarily going to be as motivated to bring your best game in game 2. So I think the Hawks, especially early, can keep this game competitive. You know, maybe if you wanted to look at like the first half line, I might like that better than the full game. You can get the Hawks +6 for the first half. I think that they can keep it somewhat competitive, at least out of the gates. But if Boston locks in and they focus, they should be able to wrap this thing up in 4 or 5 games.
Okay. Any props that you would target in this, Garion? Any player props?
To be honest, I haven't really looked too deep into player props. We can bring up the points and kind of talk about it.
Talking total right now?
Well, I just mean player points if we want to bring that up or anything along those lines.
But... Yep, I got you, dog.
Okay. Yeah, do it up, man. You're doing great on the ones and twos tonight, by the
Thanks,
way,
man.
Matty.
I'm trying.
Oh, man, you're excellent. What's your gut tell you looking at your screen right now, Gare Bear?
I mean, I could see a scenario where if you are thinking that the Celtics are going to cover this number, you're thinking this is going to be a pretty lopsided game. And sort of the scenario that Matt was talking about, where if the Hawks can keep this close early, they maybe fall away in the second half when Boston starts picking up the intensity a little bit. Like, does Jason Tatum play enough minutes to get to 31 points? So if you maybe do want to do a same game parlay and just kind of stick with a particular thought process and through line, Celtics on the spread, Tatum under 30.5. At least it makes sense.
Okay, Matty, anything stand out to you right now looking at this game in the props department?
I kind of like the over on 2.5 3-pointers for Jaylen Brown. You can get that at plus 125. He averaged right around 2.5 made 3-pointers during the regular season. So, generally when I view something that's like a coin flip, but I'm getting plus money on the bet, that's something that I would consider taking. I don't think it's like a slam dunk prop or anything, but, this Hawks team, they are really bad defensively. The Celtics, they're implied for like 120 points tonight. If they do score that much, I think expecting Jaylen Brown to have a strong showing and maybe knock down 3 threes is well within the realm of possibility.
Yeah. Okay. So another heavy favorite, not as much when we go to Knicks and Cavs here, at least on like the money line. Cavs are going to cost you like more than 2 times your potential return. That seems to be obviously just too expensive in what should be another close game. What are your expectations for this one tonight, Matty?
Defense. I don't really understand why this totals at 214 points. They played to a 198 point final score in game 1. The Cavs are the slowest team in the league. The Knicks are the 5th slowest team in the league. Both teams play plenty of defense. They're in the top 10 in defensive efficiency. The Knicks are expected to have Josh Hart in the lineup tonight, which will help them defensively and certainly on the glass. I think he's maybe the best rebounding guard in the league. So I think 214 is high. I will take the under on this game. I do expect the Cavs to win even this series up. I think they're the better team, but more than that, I just expect another low scoring rock fight.
I mean, yeah, Gary, and under 214.5 came through in the series opener. And I think a lot of that was thanks to 41 combined points in the second quarter. I mean, it was catch up after that for anyone who bet the over, but the under was never really ever threatened in game 1.
No. And look, it wasn't even what the worst case scenario of this series could be in terms of a rock fight. This game played out to a 95 possessions per 48 minutes pace in game 1, which is pretty much right on track with what the Cavaliers and Knicks were doing throughout the regular season. As Matt said, 2 of the slowest paced teams in the NBA, I believe both just over 96 possessions per 48 minutes by the end of the regular season. But we're seeing right now in that contest between the Nets and the 76ers that playoff pace in the Eastern Conference can get way low. Like, they're playing just over 90 possessions per 48 minutes. It wouldn't shock me if this game slows down even further. And then you do just have a bit of a banged up Knicks team in the sense that, I don't think you can say Josh Hart's going to be at 100% health in this contest. And Julius Randle's talked pretty candidly about not exactly being in rhythm coming off of that 2.5 week absence towards the end of the regular season. So you've just got 2 really good defensive teams who like playing slow. It seems like the obvious bet, but I just don't, I can't shy away from it. And I can't disagree with Matt. I just think 214 is way too high.
How about player props? RJ Barrett sticks out over 1.5 threes at plus 135 odds here, Matty. He made at least 2 3-point buckets in all 4 of the regular season meetings with the Cavs. And you could buy low right now in the over for his triples total tonight.
I just kind of think he stinks.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine. I respect.
I think
your honesty.
if you give the Knicks a do-over, they would go back and make him the centerpiece of a trade for Donovan Mitchell in a heartbeat. But yeah, like he's not really even a part of their closing rotation anymore. Losing those minutes to Josh Hart. So where I'm going is Jalen Brunson under 5.5 assists.
Love
right?
that.
This kind of I think correlates nicely with an under on the game total, right? On games where we're not expecting a ton of scoring, that means there are going to be less opportunities to pick up assists. Brunson had 2 assists in their first meeting. It just feels a little bit high. He was at closer to like 6 assists per game versus Cleveland during the regular season, but with some of his running mates banged up, particularly Julius Randle, I think that Brunson's going to have to play a similar role to what he did in game 1, which was operating more as like a primary scorer than as a facilitator. So I'll take the under on 5.5 times.
Wait, is Josh Hart, is he playing? Do we know what's going on with him? Has he been upgraded?
It's not official, but Adrian Wojnarowski said he is expected to play tonight.
Okay. I was going to ask you, Gary Bear, who's got to step up for the Knicks if Josh Hart can't play, and that kind of falls back on the
Canadian quickly has to step up either way. Like he's got to be better, and he's got to be a bigger offensive force in the I'm not limited time he's getting either. Like he played 24 minutes in game 1. It's still a very sizable role off the bench. Like obviously being a Knicks bench piece and not even being the 6th man in a Tom Thibodeau rotation in the playoffs doesn't necessarily mean anything, but that's even where I'm kind of leaning. Not to say that Quickly can't step up in game 2. We've obviously seen him go supernova many times so far this season, but it's a point that like, I know Matt's made it a bunch of times. I know Julian's made it a bunch of times, but Quickly was really at his best as a starter this season, despite the fact he's going to win 6th man of the year. He's not going to start in this game. Josh Hart is probably going to play his full allotment of minutes if he's available. Whether or not he plays as well as he did in game 1 is up for debate. But if you're getting plus money for Quickly to go under 11.5 points in a game that, again, is going to be slow paced, is going to be relatively low scoring, I just don't see the path to him getting more minutes tonight unless he goes supernova very early on, which again could happen. But the Cavaliers are the best defensive team in the NBA for a reason. They showed that the entirety of the season. I don't think him having an off night in game 1 was an aberration. I think it's something that you can maybe predict could happen again, even if he's not quite as bad. I just don't know if he's getting 12 points if he's only playing 20, 23 minutes.
Matty, what were you just reacting to?
Well, I have a few friends who are heavily invested in Emmanuel Quickly to win the 6th Man of the Year award.
Okay.
And they've been tracking the votes as they've been being released.
Okay.
And Malcolm Brogdon's got the lead at the moment. So
okay.
There has been some definite blowback regarding Quickly to win the award for a lot of the reasons that Garion mentioned.
The Suns lost with Kevin Durant in the lineup for the first time since he joined Phoenix. So they're now 8-1 with KD there in the lineup. Clippers pulled off the 115-110 upset in game 1. That was on Sunday. They were 8-point road underdogs. Guess what? They're 8-point road underdogs again tonight, Gare Bear. Kawhi Leonard led the way, 38 points, 5 rebounds, 5 boards. What are your expectations tonight? What is your bet on the DK Sportsbook, brother?
It's definitely an interesting spot. I think you would expect the Suns to bounce back. You mentioned how dominant they have been with Kevin Durant in the lineup. They're also a very good home team. This line does seem a little big, though. I think by himself, playoff Kawhi Leonard is like you could still maybe make the case. It's tough with Kevin Durant on the other side, but you could still maybe make the case the Clippers have the best player on the floor in this series.
Okay.
And while the Suns probably won't only hit 6 3-pointers like they did in game 1, I think that's a pretty big aberration. It's not like the Clippers were setting the world on fire from beyond the arc either. Like they could still have a much better performance shooting the basketball, even with Russell Westbrook in their starting 5, and Westbrook had a pretty good game. Yeah, I just think 8 points is maybe a little bit too much. I think it's still kind of disrespecting the Clippers.
Maddie, did anything that you watched when these two teams collided the other night tell you that Kawhi Leonard and company cannot repeat the feat tonight?
I wouldn't say that I saw something that said that they can't win it again.
Okay.
The stat that really jumped out to me though was Kevin Durant's usage rate in that first game was just slightly over 20%. It was the 6th highest mark on the Suns. That clearly cannot happen again. Durant still had a great game. He finished with like 11 assists and 9 rebounds. He was, as usual, very efficient scoring the ball with the shot attempts that he did have. But Durant needs to get that usage rate up at least into the mid-20s tonight. He's simply too good of a scorer to be deferring as much as he did in game 1. So I think that should help this Suns team. I like them to cover the spread tonight. I think that the Clippers, it was a great reminder game from Kawhi in game 1, right? I think that because he plays so infrequently during the regular season, people forget how good that guy is at basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But this Suns team, for my money, is still the best team in basketball right now. And I'm actually doubling down on the Suns. I'm taking the series price on them. You can get the Suns minus 1.5 games for plus 150. So essentially that means that the Suns have to win 4 out of the next 5, which I think is very doable for them.
Gary, it seems you're nodding your head in agreement there. They were down. The Suns were 30-18 the first quarter of game 1. You got to envision them getting off to a much better start in game 2.
Yeah, and I think, like Matt said, it's probably going to be a more concerted effort from Kevin Durant to be a finisher as opposed to a distributor. And he was fantastic in game 1. It's not like he has to necessarily change what he's doing, but that would even lead me to believe that I know you have to pay a little juice on it, but his points prop tonight is set at 27.5. And as Matt said, he scored 27 points in game 1 with a 20% usage rate. I think that number is probably going to be closer, even if it's not 30%, which there's a very realistic chance it is. It's going to be above 25% tonight. And Durant is already one of the most efficient scorers in the NBA, really NBA history. If you want to maybe get a little bit more, you could look into an alternate points line, but 27.5 seems a point or two too low for Durant.
Also, that the total, I was looking at some numbers there. Clippers 4-1 to the over in their last 5 overall. Suns 3-1 to the over in their last 4 overall. So maybe a lot of points can be scored tonight. Durant and Booker shooting 30. Damn, they combined for 34 shots in game 1. That number will 100% go up tonight. You want to shift over to the Diamond Dudes, or you got anything else you want to add into here, Maddie?
No, I think, as I mentioned, the Suns, I'm doubling down on their series prices now, and I'm doubling down on their odds to win the title. I was talking about this with some of my friends the other day. I think that it's harder right now to set like a top 5 players in the NBA than it has been in quite some time, right? Like I think Giannis and Jokic are pretty easy choices to be in the top 5. But after that, there's like 6, 7, 8 guys that can round out that group. But for my money, Kevin Durant, at least on the offensive side of the court, is still the toughest guard in the entire NBA. Like, you just cannot stop that guy. His numbers this year, granted over a small sample size, were just ridiculous. He shot nearly 60% in his games with the Suns. And they have Devin Booker, and they have Chris Paul, and they have DeAndre Ayton. Like, this is a really, really good team with a lot of talent.
Gary, we got some breaking news out of the AL East, so I know it will hit close to home for you with your Blue Jays. But Jeffrey Springs of the Rays expected to undergo Tommy John surgery. Ooh. So, yeah, I know we talked about it the other day, or maybe it was like last week, Gary, and just
Thursday,
or was it yesterday? Or was it Thursday? Yeah, that's Thursday right. It was during the streak, which, by the way, they're 1-3 since winning 13 straight to open the year. There's still Still reason for them to flex. And Jeffrey Springs too, Care Bear. He was this 30-year-old, I believe, 30th round draft pick, had the early April success, and to me was the strongest testament to the Rays pitching like redevelopment prowess. Like this team is just so good at developing prospects and maybe finding a way to get something out of guys who you thought maybe a lost cause, but he's now going to be out for the season. What's the impact of this on the Rays moving forward? Because that pitching staff already dealing with multiple injuries here, man.
No, it's massive. That was one of the major reasons to fear Tampa Bay coming into the season, even before Tyler Glasnow was injured himself. And I know reports have been pretty optimistic about Glasnow and how quickly he'll be able to come back for the Rays, probably looking more like early May as opposed to late May, like we were thinking in March. But Springs, I mean, you said it, Emerson, he's really the poster child of what the Rays do better than anyone else, is identify pitching assets in distress and finding something about, I guess the Dodgers do it pretty well too, but
Cardinals.
Yeah, and the Cardinals, although it's starting to wear off a little bit for the Cardinals. They've had some like super prospects who haven't really panned out even as bullpen pieces lately, but yeah, the Rays, they find something in someone like Springs who, you know, had potential for the Red Sox, like, you know, showed that he could at least get some strikes, but they really bring out the best in people. I'm personally very happy for him that he was paid this offseason before this all went down. Because as you mentioned, like a 30-year-old journeyman, I don't think he ever thought he was going to get a massive contract. So he was at least able to lock that up. And if the reports of Tommy John are true, he won't be back until late 2024. But this is a team that's not only missing, you know, Tyler Glasnow, obviously gave out their biggest franchise free agent contract in history to Zach Eflin this offseason. He's also on the IL. Shane Baz, who's one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, had Tommy John surgery last season. They can have their unlimited supply of young pitchers, and Taj Bradley is already up. And while he didn't have the best debut in the world, I know his Stuff Plus metrics and some of the Eno Saris specials are through the roof. I'm sure he's going to be great, but you are running out of legitimate starters. And at a certain point, that does have an impact down the line, even if you are the Tampa Bay Rays. That 13-0 start bought them a lot of breathing room. Although they are kind of, even with this series against the Reds, they're really sort of going through the easy part of their schedule, and they've got some tougher teams on the horizon. But Springs is a massive loss. He's a huge loss. And I know in the fantasy circles, especially in redraft formats and season long, he was like a darling. He was everyone's sleeper. So there are a lot of bummed fantasy owners today. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. And even without all those dudes who you just mentioned have gone down with injuries, the Rays still managed team 2.54 ERA through Sunday, thanks in large part to contributions from guys like Kevin Kelly. I mean, you mentioned Bradley, Ryan Thompson in there. I know depth is like boring as hell to talk about, but anyone in baseball will tell you it can be the differentiator at the end of the day, Matty.
Absolutely. And I think the last thing that Garion said is kind of the most important in my eyes. They won their first 13 games to start the year. If they play 500 baseball for the rest of the season, they're making the playoffs.
Yep.
You know, that's just kind of how it works. If you have one run like that, it can be the difference between, you know, missing or making the playoffs. And so I think that the Rays are in a fine spot. And if there's any organization that you can trust to overcome something like this, I do think it is Tampa Bay. You know, be it they'll use more bullpen games, or they'll sign guys, like they'll find a way, because it's just kind of what they always do. You know, before last year, I don't think anybody would have even really known who Jeffrey Springs was.
Yep.
And now we're talking about him as an integral part of a championship team. That's just something that the Rays do on a regular basis. So maybe it's just me having blind faith in this organization, but I'm not ultimately that worried about them.
No, like right now, I know Chris Archer is like a free agent, and I seriously wouldn't be shocked if Chris Archer, who hasn't looked good in 5 years, just comes in off the
Ray
street.
too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The only time
only
he's ever been
seasons of
good in his career.
Yes,
Tampa
yeah,
Bay.
but did he used that to get, where did he go? The Pirates?
Well, no, so they traded into the Pirates for Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows, who
Okay, thank you
also
for
the only
reminding me.
good seasons of his career were in Tampa Bay. They have this way of doing that.
Yeah,
But yeah, they'll sign someone off the street and find something about, oh, he can change the horizontal break on his slider by a degree and a half. And now he's going to be the third best pitcher in baseball because that's what the Rays did.
Because it's the front office of that organization that is really the not so secret weapon anymore. It's like from shifts to first pitch strikes. Like that is the organization, Gary, that is trailblazed like innovations, turn trends, turn like baseline practices within the sport.
It's interesting too, because I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday or maybe it was this morning. My timelines are all messed up, but MLB sort of released a list of things they're doing in low A this season. And it's kind of their experimentation ground for some of these rule changes.
Which everyone freaked out about that, by the way. Sorry to cut you off, but they do this at that level nonstop. This is the level where they experimented with stealing first base, for crying out loud.
Right.
Exactly.
The home run derby extra inning rule.
Yeah, which I loved.
But I think it's notable though that one of the proposed changes, or at least something they're experimenting with, is almost victimizing teams that don't have their starter go 5 innings, and you lose the DH if your starter doesn't go 5 innings. That's a direct side effect of the Rays popularizing the opener. The shift ban is a direct effect of the Rays popularizing overutilizing shifts. Like baseball is literally going after the Rays and changing the rules to make it so the Rays can't win and they have to spend more money and be competitive, as baseball should. But it's worth noting that while baseball is changing its rules to try and limit the impact of the Rays started the season 13-0 because they're the Rays. Like they overcome. Their front office is just smarter than you. It's how they roll.
Yeah, that's right. They're looked at as like a bunch of nerds. But that's how they've operated. And just going back to like your comment about Archer and guys getting moved and all that stuff, like even players, it is an organization though, or even players who have like left or have been dealt to go elsewhere, they continue to speak fondly like of their time, like in Tampa too. Like hardly anybody has anything bad to say about their time with the organization.
Well, I can't remember which coach talked about this recently, but basically saying that when you're an organization, especially as a front office person, when you're someone who does not have experience playing baseball, when you are not a former Major League Baseball player and you are trying to tell current Major League Baseball players what to do, the only way they're going to respect you is if they get results. And no organization helps players be better and then go get paid somewhere else than the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yep. Okay. So any bets on the board you would make looking at tonight's slate, which by the way, Rays and Reds get going at 6:40. I didn't learn until yesterday. The Rays haven't won in Cincinnati because they got smoked last night. The Rays haven't won in Cincinnati since like 2014. Like it's been a while. And I know the schedule has changed now, so we're going to see them there much more often than we have over the past like 9 years or whatever, but it still shocked me. So what do you got tonight, Maddie?
I have a couple picks that you can find on the DK playbook, but
DK Nation there, buddy. Look at you working.
But I think my favorite, and maybe there's a smidge of homerism here, but I like the Mets at plus 135.
Yeah. There he is. There he is.
I continue to be unimpressed by the current iteration of the Dodgers.
Okay.
Now, granted, they have a ton of people on the injured list at the moment, and losing Will Smith certainly didn't help. Losing Chris Taylor didn't help, but their lineup after the top 4 guys or so really gets thin. Their bullpen is not as dominant as it has been in years past. And Clayton Kershaw, who's on the mound tonight, still great. But he's 35 years old. His, ERA indicators are in the 4s to start the year. I just think that as these two teams are constructed at the moment, the Mets are better. And Tyler McGill hasn't pitched great to start the year, but he's 3-0. He's allowed 2 earned runs or less in all 3 starts. I think he can do something similar in LA. And while the Mets offense has gotten off to kind of a slow start, they did manage to score a ton of runs yesterday against Dustin May, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball. Pete Alonso is absolutely locked in at the dish. I think that getting the Mets as, moderate underdogs here is a good move.
Okay. Gary, and are you as passionate about your pick as Matt is about his?
Probably not, because I'm not a fan of.
You're not going Blue Jays tonight?
The Rangers and Royals scoring fewer runs than expected as he is of the Mets winning a game. But I think the under 9 in Texas KC is a really strong spot for me. Nathan Eovaldi can be a little Jekyll and Hyde, had a great second start to the season, I believe. And then his third start, he was absolutely destroyed. But right now, you're looking at 2 lineups that are very underwhelming. The Royals are dead last or near dead last in virtually every single major offensive category. I think Eovaldi can have a really good start tonight. Brad Keller is a really interesting guy. Like, there's always a handful of pitchers early on in the season where you play the game of, are these early results legitimate or not? And I think one reason to be a little bit optimistic about Keller is he completely scrapped his pitch mix coming into this season. He basically learned how to throw a curveball. And that curveball has been devastatingly good so far this season. It's his second highest usage rate pitch. It's garnering a 37% whiff rate. He's throwing his fastball a lot less, which is great because his fastball got destroyed last season. And this is also a Rangers lineup that looks really underwhelming on paper when you take Corey Seager out of it. So I think in general, this is going to be a low scoring game. I think even if this number was 8, I'd probably still lean towards the under. And then I'll give you a prop. Shohei Ohtani total bases. I like over 1.5 at plus money. Always very fun to take a Shohei over at plus money in general. But Clark Schmidt has been bad in general to start this season for the Yankees. He has been specifically terrible against left-handed bats. Nightmarishly bad, really. Lefty opponents hitting .433 with a .767 slugging percentage off of Clark Schmidt so far this season. There's a case to be made that Shohei Ohtani is one of the best left-handed hitters in baseball, if not the best left-handed hitter in baseball. I think he at least doubles tonight off of Clark Schmidt. Also helps this game is in New York. Short porch for Ohtani. It's not going to take much more than a flick of the wrist to get that ball over the fence.
I mean, speaking of the best, like Jacob deGrom, he exited with wrist soreness, just since we're on the topic here of the Rangers, Gare Bear, after 4 no-hit innings against the Royals. What was that, last night? And I know we only have a couple minutes left in the show, but I want to get your opinion on this. Can he be considered the best in baseball given his durability?
No, but he's still a guy who, if you're the Rangers, and we talk about like depth not being fun to talk about.
Yes.
The Rangers specifically built a rotation that while there were major health concerns across the board, they at least built up enough depth where, generally speaking, a pretty solid guy is taking the mound for the Rangers every single night. And if you can keep Jacob deGrom, even if he only throws 120 innings during the regular season, if he is ready for game 1 of a playoff series, suddenly, yeah, he's the best pitcher in baseball because you only have to worry about what's happening that day. And Jacob DeGrom's
the Mets thought they were doing that last year.
I was waiting for you to chime in here.
The Mets thought they were doing that last year, and they thought that they got to the playoffs with a healthy Jacob deGrom. And, he really was not vintage deGrom at that point and kind of got hit hard by the Padres. Yeah. So
I don't think he's David Price, though. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was probably more of a one-off.
Yeah, this
other guy who was great with the Rays at one point.
This is the thing with deGrom. There is no such thing as him being healthy. He is always one pitch away from arm discomfort. He could rest from now until the first game of the playoffs, and you would be just as nervous when he took the ball for the first time as if he was out there pitching every 5 days. There is no denying that when the guy is on the bump, he is the best pitcher in the league. His talent is absurd. His strikeout rate is over 40% for the 3rd straight year. As you mentioned, he was no-hitting a team before he had to leave with a precautionary illness, which is something that I have heard and will hear in my nightmares for years. But it's just, I think that him being so frail and throwing with such velocity, it's just such an unnatural strain on your body that this is kind of what life is going to be like for Rangers fans for the next 6 years.
Yep. Because I think across town from you there, man, Garrett Cole has pushed himself towards the Cy Young Award conversation with that ridiculous start that he has. And he's also, and I mentioned this morning on our Tuesday takeover with Jared Carabas, he is a Springer Spaniel fan. All right. His favorite breed, Springer Spaniel, as you know, yours truly, has a couple sass bags back at
They're
home.
all right.
He's also, I mean, look,
What?
I don't like saying nice things about Garrett Cole, but
What,
he's like the
bucko?
opposite. Something's happening here.
Sorry,
He's like
go
the
ahead.
opposite of Jacob deGrom. That dude throws 200 innings every season. It's
Yeah, Matt. Okay. Also, I don't blame Jacob deGrom. I think he's just trying to get out of having to wear those god awful City Connect
Oh, they are
jerseys.
awful. They
Dude,
are awful.
Dude, like, listen, there have been some cool ones. I know we have to go. Like, Miami's sick as hell. I love what the Rockies have. That's like a futuristic jersey.
Arizona's is cool.
Yeah. But oh my God, no, Rangers. Oh no, baby. Like, what is you doing? And then there was like what is this mysterious creature that's on there? It's called like a Peagle. But then what they don't really realize is like a Peagle's also like a breed of dog with
Is that a
that's
pug
a
and
mix.
beagle?
No, it's a mix between a Beagle and a Pekingese.
Oh.
So the whole like Peagle thing feels a little weird. It's like it should be a puppy. Here, let me show you. Let me show you what one looks like before we go. It's like this little guy. Like this is what I think. This is what I see when there's a Peagle. Look at this.
Oh, hey, buddy.
Oh.
Hey there, partner. Anywho, guys, that was fun. I'm glad we got to hang out. I think Madden's coming up next. We got to go. Hold on. They just dropped in the game. What is it going to be? Chicago and Houston. So the Bears and the Texans. So that's it. Love you guys. Mean it. Everyone, we are back in studio tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock Eastern time for a hump day edition of The Sweat. We will see you then. Peace.